Hi, everybody. Welcome to Thoughts and Feelings. And today I'm talking with Haley. Now, Haley is a person I have never met. We've just had a little 10-minute screener before this just to make sure that we're real people. And we're going to talk about an important subject, which is why it's so difficult to get help with mental health issues. I find this fascinating. I think about this all the time. So first of all, welcome, Haley.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So did you want to start here? There's so many places we could begin. You could start by talking about your own journey or a general comment about why it's difficult to get help in terms of your mental health.
Sure. I'll start probably a little more generally, and I think build upon that. I would say a big reason that it's so difficult to get mental health help is the stigma attached to it. I mean, that was one of my main reasons for not getting mental health help for so long. But I know generally it's not something that is openly talked about. It's kind of taboo, or at least it was. Maybe my parents' generation, your parents' generation, it might have been a little more taboo to talk about, like going to a therapist, almost like it was a shameful thing. And I feel like now it's much easier to find people who empathize with similar mental health struggles, because maybe through social media, maybe through all of us getting closer together, maybe it's just easier to find people who we wouldn't have otherwise met, just like we're talking right now, and understand that, oh, there are other people going through the same thing I'm going through. I'm not so alone, and I can talk to someone about this, whatever this is.
Right. So it's interesting, though. You're saying almost two opposite things. You're saying that the stigma is going away, and you're saying that stigma, I'm guessing this is personal to you, has gotten in the way of you originally seeking help. So like, I totally agree. The stigma was huge when I was growing up. I was growing up in like the 80s and 90s. And, most people thought that basically crazy people are the ones who go to therapy and stuff like that. I would say. And there were some people that were like, oh, okay, yeah, some people do that. It was like just somewhat okay. Nowadays, I think it's much more normalized, but you made the statement, and I do think that that's correct. There still is plenty of stigma. So I'm curious for you personally, where the stigma came from, because it comes from somewhere. It's like the culture you grew up in, it's parents, it's friends. Like, what was your experience with the stigma part of it?
I'd say my experience with the stigma part of it started from a household that wasn't anti-therapy. It wasn't anti-mental health help. It was just, you kind of put your head down and you just muddled through, if that makes sense. I have, on my dad's side, my grandpa was a Holocaust survivor, and my grandma was a Hungarian immigrant, very Eastern Bloc mentality, the both of them, where they kind of just put everything that wasn't of like immediate importance to the side, and they just did the work. And they were people who believed that through work, every problem after that would be solved. And that's something I feel like was kind of perpetuated in my household through my dad. And my mom was just very withdrawn. Even now today, she's very withdrawn. She just doesn't, it's like you have to pry her open to get any sort of read on her. So it's not as if they were anti-help. They just had never grown up in an environment that actively encouraged talking about your feelings, or it just wasn't prioritized, I suppose. I don't know. Have you run into the same issues in your family life? Or, I know there's a little bit of an age difference between us. I grew up in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, so.
Well, I'm actually finding that I relate a lot to what you're saying, because what I'm learning is that you're Jewish, and I am Jewish as well. Somewhere in my family is Holocaust survivors, but it's not a direct like grandparent for me. But it is a very common thing amongst Jewish families to just say you suffer silently and you don't need to tell everybody your problems. Like that's kind of, I think I've literally heard those words from grandparents. Like, what do I need to tell everybody my problems? Okay, they're personal. And it's like they're
Grandfather right there. Yeah.
right. And I think my dad feels the same way. When I was going to therapy more than one time per week, and he's like, if you go to therapy more than like once a month, you just have a babysitter. And that was a very impactful statement to me because I felt very misunderstood. I was like, wow, that is absolutely not true. The things that I know to be true are clashing with that statement tremendously. I feel, like really not seen by that, because therapy for me has been one of the most important things I've ever done for myself, and it's unlocked an ability to see the truth in myself, know myself better, and therefore feel much more confident and happy. It's like it unlocked the ability to feel all things, which includes happy feelings. So it definitely runs deep in family.
Oh yeah.
Past generations also, in some way, didn't have the luxury of worrying about their feelings and stuff because life was so much harsher for them. That's my perception. If you disagree, I want to hear. But basically, it's like if you are one generation away from the Holocaust, then you're worried about survival and the decency of family being together, being able to eat meals together, be protected. Like you're you're worried about not having somebody that's trying to make you extinct. I mean, that's a pretty gigantic difference, survival versus being able to self-actualize, or what we're kind of talking about here.
I would agree with you. I would definitely say that. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to have access to mental health care, and that my immediate safety is not a concern like it was for my grandparents. And that means I can shift focus more on my own personal well-being, uh, like aside from, oh, am I going to be able to eat tonight? Do I have to hide or something? I I resonate with the idea that it was probably seen it to our parents and grandparents generations that it probably is seen as a luxury, and maybe not one that we, I think, associate mental health help with today, which is almost maintenance for continuing to be able to function healthily and happily and productively. um, and I think more and more it's being seen that way, and I think that's a positive change. But I think you're right. I think definitely it's not something that my grandparents, if they were alive today, they wouldn't get it. I don't think they'd understand that, you know, like, what do you need to talk to a stranger for? You got family, or just put your head down and work. I'd agree with you for sure.
Yeah, there's something about that I find very limited when people don't see someone else's problems because their problems are less intense or dire than their own problems. So, for instance, if a grandparent or a parent says, "You've got it made, kid. You don't know. You don't have problems," type of thing. And I know I'm just making up a character here, but I do sense that attitude in a few different aspects of life. I've experienced that, where I'm just a strong believer that you may have problems that don't seem like problems to someone else, but they're personal to you, and everybody lives in their own psychic world, where the world of their subconscious and conscious mind. And it's for nobody to say that your problems aren't real, because they're what determine how you feel during the day. I mean, the things in your head, made up or not, could make you feel like life is not even worth living anymore, or could make you feel thrilled. I mean, it's that big of a difference. So to try to be objective about the scale of your problems versus someone else's, I think is a fruitless exercise.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I've not understood how someone could say, like, oh, I've got it so much worse than you. None of us asked to be here. We're all just dealing with the cards we were dealt under the circumstances we were dealt them. And so it's hard to understand why people throw that out so flippantly, like, oh, you've got it made, kid. I've even heard it from my parents, like, it's like the you had to walk, or I had to walk, 10 miles to school in the snow kind of argument, like you've got it so easy. But it's not the same. And I feel like I've noticed, especially when people talk about getting mental health help, specifically with the aid of medication, that people that stigma around help intensifies, and there's almost even more of a pushback to, like, oh, just muddle through it, just deal with it. I don't think my grandparents or your grandparents would understand therapy necessarily, but they probably wouldn't even more understand the need for medication to supplement therapy. So
No, it's very much in line with what we're talking about, and it's reminding me of when people make statements about what their parents did, and then after that say, well, and we ended up fine. Like I heard somebody recently in just like a group I was in, for some reason they were talking about the concept of hitting their kids, and this woman's like, nobody was abusing us, but we got spanked and we turned out fine. And I'm like, what a hollow argument that is. You turned out fine versus what if you didn't get spanked, and what if you didn't have to feel scared of an adult that could hurt you, that you were defenseless against. Like maybe that would have changed your feeling. It could have changed a lot. So I don't think it's reasonable to say we turned out fine. Almost anybody could be said to turn out fine unless they are constantly acting out, crazy person or something. What we're really talking about is the fact that the scale of problems is very relative. And it does seem like in successive generations, things are getting better. Well, I'm a believer in that. Some people feel like things are getting worse. And I believe things are generally getting better, but it's like one of those like, up, down kind of curves where for some people, life's tougher than it was for their parents, and other people it's better. But I think generally speaking, there's more resources to go around. Fewer people are in like absolute poverty in the world and stuff like that. And so we do quote unquote have the luxury of worrying about problems like how do we sort of regulate our moods, or take care of ourselves if we end up feeling really down, with therapy or medication. And I think that's good. We should be going in that direction. We're evolving as a people. So anyway, I may have gone a little a little far in a different direction.
That's good. And it makes me think of when older generations of people I think of this specifically with the idea that people stay married or have stayed married longer, like the rates of divorce, for example, 50 years ago, not what they were today. And people say, when we had problems, we just stayed together. We didn't just leave, but it's never that simple. And I suppose we'll never know how that could have been affected if there wasn't such a stigma around seeking counseling, seeking mental health help back 50 years ago, because there very might well have been people who would have loved to get counseling. And maybe it's not that. I happen to believe that people probably put up with a lot more because they didn't feel as enfranchised to speak up or say anything, or just generally, whether it's relationships, like interpersonal relationships, your power at a job, all sorts of things. I feel like people have more of a leg to stand on nowadays, or at least they feel like they have the room to voice their concerns more than they ever have before, because we have the luxury of seeing what that looks like from the future, looking into the past. Yeah, your grandparents stayed together for 60 years, but your grandmother's a shell of a woman and your grandpa's a grumpy old man. so
I don't know if you're going to go there, but I like it. There's truth in what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I figure now we have the ability to work work through our problems in a healthy way, that we don't just have to rely on ourselves and our own personal abilities to either A, muddle through it without any sort of constructive information about how to really work past a problem in a healthy way. We have people trained to do that now. And I feel like, I don't know where it happened along the way that we became more open to it. Again, I think it's probably with the idea that we've become closer as a planet because we can talk to people more easily and understand that someone halfway across the world is probably going through the same problems you are, and it's okay to talk about them.
There's a number of things that you've said, and I think there's one thing that I picked up on that I felt like talking about, which goes back a little bit, and it has to do with when people do stigmatize getting help. And I think that we're not in this conversation just talking about people that completely say therapy is useless, or, you should be able to figure it out on your own, because that's pretty black and white. I think many people would agree that that's a closed-minded way of talking about it. But there's other ways to stigmatize mental health that are more subtle that I've noticed, or mental health help, I mean. And that is like basically, is it I'm not sure if these people are stigmatizing or if they're afraid of getting true mental health help, but all the time I hear people talk about getting help from a coach or a church or something like that. And I think to myself, there's certainly community kinship type of help coming from that. But these people are probably not thinking about what's happening in your subconscious, which is probably like the whole thing that you need addressed. We all feel better when we have someone to listen to us, when we can appeal to the spiritual, when we feel integrated in community. And there's many people set up in helping professions that do that, but that are not really addressing your problem. So I think most people that think that they're getting help, even some people that describe themselves as having therapy or being in therapy, are being helped far less than they think, because they're not getting at the root cause of their problems. And this is something I rarely say out loud because I think many people would be offended by it, but I feel certain of it. My life experience has told me that. I'll stop there. What do you think of that?
I think that people definitely, I don't want to say that it's ever wrong to put the burden of your mental health struggles onto someone else, because it's never burden if someone's offering the help. I would say that there is a problem in people getting help from the wrong places. I happen to believe, as much as it's great to have faith in a community of people who are, ready and willing to support you, you're right that they're not going to know what you know. And you're probably not going to be open to tell them everything for fear of judgment. I feel like seeking out that kind of help is only beneficial if you know you're speaking to someone objective, and you're not going to get objective help necessarily from a church or, other organizations. I feel like there's probably a lot of ways that people like to take shortcuts with their mental health help, probably because they don't like to be confronted with doing the work themselves, and maybe as many people as possible that they could like plant their seeds with and kind of unload the burden from their shoulders, or at least they think they are, might solve whatever immediate issue they're dealing with, or at least might relieve some temporary anxiety, but it's not going to get to the root of the problem. You're right. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to tell people, like, hey, don't go to this thing that you're familiar with and makes you comfortable to open up in. because you think it's going to help you when it probably is. Unless they're professional mental health helpers, it's probably not going to be as beneficial as it could be. It's a good first step, but they might steer you left when you need to be going right.
Right. I think what we're kind of arriving at together, and you tell me if you agree, is that back to the original question of why it's so difficult to seek mental health help. Part of the reason, I think what we're saying, is that people are avoidant or afraid of getting that help, and therefore they pretend in a certain way that they're getting the help by saying, I spoke to my life coach, or I spoke to a dear friend, and I just unburdened myself. And on some level, perhaps just subconsciously, they probably understand that they didn't address the root issue, and maybe they're not even aware of what it is. But they really don't want to so badly that they'd rather disguise help from other places up as they really sought help when they truly haven't. So I think the phenomenon of self-deception, or whatever you want to call that, and well-intentioned, of course, but deceiving yourself is one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest, in my opinion, that people don't get the proper mental health help today.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, you agree with that? Okay, because I have strong opinions about this, and I think I have these strong opinions out of love, because I do love people in general. I'm an extrovert, and I want generally like the collective of all people to do better over time, and I want to contribute in some small way. And I think it starts by recognizing things like this. So I do have strong opinions about how tough it is for people to admit that they need help.
I mean, best case scenario, someone wants a hand holder, and that might be a little crass to say. But I think worst case scenario, people want a hand holder to just kind of either guide them, like tell them what they should be doing, so they don't have to feel responsible if something doesn't work out the way they want it to, or they just want some affirmation that, oh no, you're fine, oh you're not, you're just a little sad, this'll pass, and then they feel like you're right, they'll feel like they got help. But unless there's a person kind of playing good cop bad cop with them, and someone needs to be the bad cop, someone needs to say, no, I'm not the person that you need to be coming to this with. I am a friend. I know, because I've been that friend. I am not equipped to handle what you've got going on, as much as I'd love to help you. You need to seek professional help, and I'm happy to help you facilitate that, but I am not the one. And I feel like a lot of people don't have that kind of person in their life, and they need one.
I agree. Okay, so to kind of zoom in a little bit, because we've been kind of high level talking about these issues that are so important. Can you tell me a little bit about your history with being able to or not being able to seek help with your mental health, if you'd be comfortable?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I have never, I mean, it's kind of classic, you're fine until like you're about a teenager, and then things start going off the rails a little bit. But I've always had anxiety problems. I could just never put a name to it. I've always had focus problems. I could never put a name to it. I'd like to think I've always been smart. I feel like I'm pretty smart. My grades don't reflect that. My grades from about middle school onward would not have reflected any sort of advanced academic ability. And my parents never knew why, because I'd grown up with probably more discipline before that time, and I was an A student. But that middle to high school period of time just went off the rails focus wise. I wasn't a partier, didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't have many friends, no reason to be performing as poorly academically as I was. And it made me anxious, of course, but I there was a mental block that I just couldn't work past. I have a twin sister on the spectrum. We're fraternal twins, and she's on the autism spectrum. She has Aspergers. And so when we were little, we were both evaluated. It was kind of like a control outlier situation. And so my parents didn't think there was anything up with me. And I didn't either. I wouldn't have known. But as I grew older, it was probably more apparent that there was some sort of attention deficit going on, because there's no reason a perfectly capable teenager who is smart should have the sort of problems I was having.
Hmm.
And my mom wanted to get me help, but because I'd seen how poorly people were treated who needed extra help through my sister, I never wanted to get that extra help. I never wanted to find out definitively if there was something up with me that I could have been controlling through therapy and medication, because seeing my sister grow up side by side, we were in the same grade, but she was treated differently than I was by students, by teachers. It was horrible with teachers, actually. And I didn't want anyone to think less of me. Like I'd seen people think less of my sister, who I loved. And so I didn't get help. And it definitely affected my college experience. I mean, I just turned 27. I just graduated college this summer at 26.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken me this long. And only through my own, like, okay, I need to, for my own sake, be the motivating factor in my getting help, was I able to get a proper diagnosis of ADHD and generalized anxiety, getting therapy, getting put on medication. And it shouldn't have taken that much, but I feel like there was definitely stigma just through my own personal experience. That's my reason for not getting help as soon as I know I could have.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like for other people who maybe don't have the kind of personal experience I have with seeing someone so close to them go through what are the negative aspects of people knowing there's something like up with you.
That's very interesting. So you have your twin sister as this like perfect contrast, as you put it, like a control in an experiment, who you see basically being treated like an outcast in a way, is how I'm interpreting what you're saying.
Yeah.
Certainly, like there's a label on her that is not doing her any favors,
Right.
and you don't want that. And
Yeah.
so I think there's so much to that story, but I'm just curious about like you being able to say, I have ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder, whatever it's called. How does that feel for you? Is there any stigma right now as you say that?
Not right now. I would say there was more stigma around not knowing, because it's almost as if, well, at least I have a name. I could put a name to it. I'm not lazy.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not lazy, and I know I'm smart. And if I didn't have a proper diagnosis, there would be no reason to not be able to function like a normal person. I don't have any personal stigma around it, and if someone were to ask me, like, what's your deal, I would be quick to tell them, because I feel like it's important to be comfortable being open with a diagnosis if you have one, if you're comfortable, of course, because you never know who's going through the same thing.
Hmm.
You never know who's like struggling, like, why can't I focus, why do people call me a space cadet? I got that a lot in high school, in college. Why are you like, just, why are you just weird and stuff? So if I could be a little, I'm not afraid of being open. I know it's not easy to be upfront and candid with those problems. So no, I would say there's no stigma around it now. I'd say, or at least generally, the only time I would say it could be stigmatizing is if you're talking to someone who has a warped idea of what that means to a person without actually getting to know the person. You know, it would never be the first thing I come out with,
Yeah,
but if someone asked,
I see. So, I mean, that sounds really healthy. And it's like you've done a 180 from when you were in middle school and early high school, and when you started to realize that when your grades started to go down and you started to realize something was up, and you were, quite fearful of a label. Now you embrace it. It's actually quite good because it helps explain something that was really confusing, and it sounds like took a hit to your confidence.
yeah, I would say so. I'm not a naturally confident person, I would say. I'd say I'm good at putting on an air, but I feel like being secure in who I am and being not only that and being able to healthily manage everything that stems from the kind of deficiency that I have, which again, anyone with mental health struggles knows it's not a choice to have mental health struggles
Mhm.
or to have any sort of academic struggles. It's having that diagnosis and knowing that you're doing everything you can to properly manage it to the best of your ability has given me so much more confidence, and it's given me back a sense of control where otherwise felt like I was spiraling.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever felt that way. It's like I don't know. I don't call myself a control freak. I wouldn't say that, but I feel like there's comfort in being able to control some of your situation, just being a human on this planet. It's helped kind of restore that, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I do relate. I like to control things as well. You may notice that my background is very neat and styled and stuff, and it's always like that. It's never messy. So that gives you a sense of.
I have the ability to do that.
I think I was just feeling like struck by that you find it very useful to be able to talk openly about what's going on. And that's almost like a tool that you have, is to be able to, oh, yeah, so I know what it was. It was about understanding what's true for you when you have a problem. And you said, I don't know if you've had that experience. And I definitely have, but I think for you, it sounds, based on the way you're describing it, like you had a clear sign that your grades weren't commensurate with your intelligence and abilities. And so you were like, what's going on? It was so confusing. So for me, I also had something bad going on, but I didn't know there was a problem. I had this extra layer. So basically, I was depressed through most of my life and into most of my 20s, but I thought I was happy. So this is the confusing thing. I didn't even know if I could have just known, oh, you're depressed, then it would have been very helpful, because I would have been seeking a solution actively, and I'm pretty good at finding solutions. I'm a very practical guy, but I didn't know. Somewhere deep down, there was a part of me that realized something was off, but I never wanted to look it in the eye. I was too scared of it. And I think it was in moments where I would drink like a bottle of wine before going out with friends or something like that by myself. And I don't know. I could not think about it. I did it and I was like, awesome. I feel great now. I'm so happy. I really had this thought. I like half feel bad for myself thinking about, like, as a different person, younger me, almost like I'm looking at a different person, and then half find it funny what a silly head I was to do that. But I didn't know. And I wish I did, because I could have looked for specific solutions. And once I figured it out, that's when I was confused for a while, which I think is healthy. And then finally I was like, I should probably seek help. I should seek help, because now I know what to tell the therapist. Because before I'd just be like, I don't need help. Life's great. I don't know why I'm here. I did go, someone told me to go, and I was like, oh, something was cluing me into the fact that I needed it, but it wasn't helpful because I wasn't ready. Anyway, I don't know if you relate to any of that, because it almost sounds like you were clearer, like something's wrong, but I don't know what it is.
I think I was about as clear as you were. You knew that something was up. Maybe you couldn't put a name to it yet, but you knew what it sounds like. You knew what happiness maybe looked like, and what you were feeling were not matching up. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was I knew what focus felt like, and I know what it felt like to not wake up with my heart pounding out of my chest, because it's happened before. It was never a constant. It wasn't a regular occurrence that I would ever feel like okay, but I knew what it felt like. And I knew what I was normally feeling, like on a daily basis, was different. So knowing that, and the different wasn't good, I think is the main part of that. That's like, that the thing you're not experiencing, like, for any sort of tangible amount of time, that's what you're looking to make a constant in your life, which for me was the focus. For me was the lack of anxiety, unless I had something to be anxious about. And it sounds like for you that you you knew what happiness felt like, or maybe was supposed to feel like or look like, but something wasn't matching up. It wasn't matching up like you thought it was supposed to, or knew it was supposed to.
Mm-hmm. I kind of appreciate that you're struggling a little bit with describing, based on what I said, whether I knew what happiness was or not. So I could say, I want this, because it sounds like you said you knew a bit. You have had at least flickers of this is what focus looks like. And you're like, why can't I do this? And I really have never thought about whether I knew what happiness felt like. I certainly knew what moments of feeling better were like, but I mostly just had a perpetual confusion, and I strongly sensed that there was a way to feel better. And yet I was completely committed to not go in that direction, because to feel better, I had to walk through the depression on the way. And I must have known that. I mean, I think we know so much that we're not conscious of, far more than we're conscious of. And this is not me. I think this is a tenet of the psychology profession. I just mostly knew it subconsciously, and I don't think I had a single conscious association with what I know today to be happiness or peace or calmness or contentness or something, or contentment. I mean, yeah, what I know today, I just didn't have back then. I had no access. I had no model of it. I'd never felt it before, but I knew there was a better way. It's almost like there was this human drive or instinct, or maybe I remembered it from when I was like a baby or something like that, before all this anxiety and, depression came over me. Something clued me in that there was a better way, but I don't know how to put my finger on it right now.
You definitely sound like a smart guy. I think that being smart, I feel like, comes with a stigma of its own. Like, I see people who are like ignorant and blissful. Like, that's the ignorance is bliss kind of thing. So
Mhm.
you almost kind of, at least for me, I kind of withdrew. I'm like, well, I'm not ignorant. I see everything going on that I don't like, and I should be able to kind of, because I'm so clued in, I should be able to work through whatever problems I've got, and I don't need the help because I'm so clued into myself. And these people are not, but they're happy. It just doesn't make it. I feel like there's a stigma around also people who are, I don't want to say smart as if it's some overarching thing to describe any one person, because people can be smart in so many different ways. But I feel like there's definitely some sort of something to get past when you're like, I'm aware enough that there is a problem, and therefore I should be able to manage this problem myself. because a lot of times people have to be told by someone else they have a problem. Whereas I think you and I knew there's something here, but I just can't put my finger on it. And I also don't want to confront it.
So far, it sounds like you had an awareness that there was a better way to be that you could get to if you could figure out what was wrong and then help yourself. I'm curious when you started being able to articulate that out loud the way that you are right now. And it could even be just to yourself, but in the form of a conscious thought or a sentence or writing it, you know, a spoken sentence or writing it. Like, at what point were you able to say, I'm a bright individual who should be able to focus, and yet I can't. And so I have a problem to fix, you know, or I have a problem to address.
I'd say it was fairly recent. I'd say within the last couple of years, I transferred when I graduated from my community college. I transferred to a university out of state, and so I had a lot of time to
Mhm.
myself. And
Mhm.
through kind of observing the people around me, and I guess more intimately studying the things I had come to actually set my sights on, like once you get to that higher university level and you start to study the things you're passionate about instead of just like the GEs, and realizing that, like, wait, I actually care about this stuff. This isn't the first 2 years of college anymore. I actually care about what I'm studying now. Why can't I focus?
Mm.
Why can I not like get it together for the things I care so much about? I thought before that I wasn't focusing because I literally didn't care about high school, about, you know, I got it together in the first 2 years of college a little more, but definitely paid more attention to the things I was passionate about, as I think a lot of us do. And I thought it would be the same way. I thought I'd be able to reel it in a little more once I was actually studying something I was passionate about, and yet I
Mm.
wasn't. So that's when I really started to get a handle on, okay, it's not just me. It's not that I just don't care about this, because now I care and I'm still having the same problems. I need to get help
Mm.
because there's something that's out of my control that causes me to not just, there's something.
Yeah. So what? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
Oh, no, yeah, no, go ahead.
Um, it sounds like what you're saying is that there was enough accumulation of experience that you were able to contrast, you know, the fact that you liked what you were studying and yet you still couldn't focus on it with the excuse that you made earlier, I just don't care about it. But based on things I've observed lately, I have a question because I, you know, I've done some dialogues with people that say that somewhere in their early to mid 20s is when they really started to have a certain type of awakening. And I don't know that they've attributed it to having some distance from their family home, you know, having a number of years under their belt of being an independent adult and then able to confront things, or possibly just some maturation or development in their brain chemically. I have no idea, but I'm almost wondering whether if you like randomly went to college, you know, several years earlier, let's say you went to college when you were like 16 or something, would you have had this awakening when you were like 20 or 22 or something? Or is it something about this stage in life that you're at now that has allowed you at least the space to realize what's true for you?
I don't know. That's the thing. I think having the space, regardless of whatever age it happened at,
Hmm.
would have made its own difference, and it might have made the difference quicker in the kind of help. And I think it would have made a difference. It's hard to say with any sort of accuracy, not having lived through life that way. Um, because I I feel like I was always probably an emotionally mature maybe more emotionally mature than my peers around me. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative because I definitely didn't have a lot of friends in high school, but I I I had to be ready for that information, and I think the space to not have someone breathing down your neck all the time probably helped. Um, because I don't know if I was an indignant little teenager, I can't remember, or just didn't want, I don't know. But I wanted to do things on my terms, and I feel like that's probably carried through to my adult life a little bit. And I feel like that probably does come with maturity. I think that comes with the years, maybe a little more toned down, because I think saying that I want to do things on my terms still means that you, in this circumstance, in the mental health, you know, the topics we're talking about, you still need to surrender some control to someone else ultimately, especially if you're able to recognize that there's something out of your control that you need help with and you haven't been able to help yourself up until this point. So I think the years and the development of maturity are probably the main things that help that journey along.
That makes sense. And now I'm thinking about the intersection with a comment you made earlier. I forget what tense you used, but did you say, you said that you haven't been a confident person, or that you're not the most confident person. I'm curious about the impact on your confidence of realizing this truth about yourself. Did it decrease confidence, or do you see it as pushing it up, or no impact yet because it was only a couple of years ago, like you said?
I would say I'm not a naturally confident person currently. I I've definitely tried. I definitely, no one who met me would ever think I'm not a confident person, but I would say I've become more confident, especially in the last less than a year. I officially got my diagnoses in December, so it wasn't that long ago at all.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I would say having that that semblance of control over my circumstances has definitely not restored confidence because I never had it really, but awakened a new confidence that I've never gotten to experience before. Because honestly, when I feel like I'm at my best, I can accomplish anything. There's no one who can tell me no, I can't do something except myself, which is something I've never been able to experience before because I've always been telling myself I can't do things, or I've had someone else telling me, you're not working hard enough, don't even try. And it's nice to, although I'll never, I think, have a natural well of confidence, it's nice to know that I can make that happen for myself. I was just going to say, how have you dealt with like confidence in your career, in your life? I don't know. It's hard when you've gone through any sort of mental health struggle.
Yeah. Well, I'll make the comment I was going to make, and then it really does go into your question. The comment I was going to make is that you said that you recently turned 27. Is that right?
Mhm.
I predict you're going to really enjoy your 30s, long time from now. I'm not trying to push age.
I
I
hope so.
predict that. The reason I predict that is because that's exactly what happened to me. I started to get significant help right around your age, and I'm 12 years older than you. Right around your age is when I started to sort of awaken, go to therapy, realize how insecure I was and what I really felt about myself, which it took me years to get to because I was so afraid and ashamed to learn my opinions of myself and what I really believed. And it just took me a long time because I was stubborn about it. And fortunately or unfortunately, I had a lot of career success when I was young. And it allowed me to get away with a lot of stuff. Like I was seen as eccentric when you could have seen me as insecure or depressed if I hadn't been successful. So I think that stalled my mental health evolution and growth. But I, when I got into my 30s, I really underwent a major shift in that I started to feel less ashamed of the problems that I had, started to feel comfortable talking about it with people, started to feel comfortable admitting it to myself, and confidence that was never there eventually grew, because I found that you can build confidence later in life if you don't have as strong confidence. I can't tell if I'm naturally confident. I think I am, but I definitely had tremendous insecurity throughout most of my childhood and into my 20s. Um, but years of reinforcement, not that I was good at stuff. I've gotten reinforcement since I was, I don't know, my whole schooling. I got great grades. I went to an Ivy League school. I, was successful early. I had all that stuff. I was still insecure as hell. What really made me feel secure is being able to be honest with others about who I really was and having them like me anyway. Years of that, not the first time it happened, not the first year after it happened, but years of that is what eventually slowly built up a feeling like, hey, I'm okay. I do feel good about myself. So that's why I'm saying that even though I don't know you or anything about what's developing in your life, I have a feeling that this newfound ability to identify what's true and admit what's wrong, and then when you need help and get that help, is going to serve you well and lead you in directions of having relationships with people that accept you for who you are, and years passing that slowly build up a well of okayness about yourself. So
That gives me hope. That gives me hope. I was afraid of the later start, sort of. I put a
yeah,
stigma on myself about a late start to everything, but that gives me hope. But
yeah. I mean, I genuinely feel that way. Yeah, and what you're describing doesn't seem like a late start to me, I guess. I mean, it's one of those things that when you're older than somebody, you're always like, oh my God, you're a kid. And I'm just like, oh, anytime in your 20s, like you're a kid. And I mean, your 20s are when you figure yourself out. Um, not completely, not like you know yourself super
no,
well.
I'm no expert on myself. No one, and that's the thing. No one knows you better than yourself, and you don't know anything yet. At least I know that I don't know anything yet. Is what I'm telling myself.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. I definitely felt like the being old on college campuses thing. I was like, God, I'm too old to be here. But it's good to know that there is some hope in the future for what's to come.
Yeah, I feel that way a little bit because I became a dad, not really old, but older than most people in that, I'm 39 now, and we had our son when I was 37. And, a lot of people have kids when they're in their, late 20s. I think mostly early 30s nowadays is what it's become, at least in the culture I grew up. I grew up in like New York, Long Island Jewish culture. And which somehow I feel like you might have experience with, even though I don't even know where you live. I don't even know what city you live in, but
Yeah, no, I'm in Santa Rosa, but now that I've finished college, my parents or not my parents so much, but definitely my extended family is like, so when are you going to settle down?
I am 0% surprised. Yeah, that's a totally other topic.
No, I empathize with you. I empathize with you for sure on that.
Yeah, but so I had a child later, and I was conscious about it, and my wife and I were both very thoughtful about it, and like waited. And she's younger than me, so she didn't have a child this late. But I think you need time, and whatever time it takes you to accumulate experience to be able to take on things in life, stages of life. And some people just do it early and fly through it. And yes, they're living through it, but are they experiencing it as deeply and the way that they really want it? I can honestly say I'm experiencing being a father in the way that I wanted to. And not that it's like perfect or something, but I'm conscious. I can appreciate my son. I've spent time building up the resources I need in my life to be able to spend time with him and take care of him, be mature enough, mostly like the emotional health resources.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm
So,
sure he'll appreciate that also later in life because he'll be conscious of it too, especially if those are things you pass down to him.
yes. Oh, that's very conscious. That's like big deal to me. Is he's
He won't
gotta
have to jump through the hurdles that I'm sure you had to come to that understanding, and like that'll be great for him. And he'll understand the hard work that takes because it doesn't just come from nowhere. You're either lucky enough to have someone explain all of it to you, or you have to go through your own things and pass that knowledge down.
right. And not everybody comes through it as successfully as you and I do in terms of being able to sit here and, be in a healthy circumstance and have a conversation like this. So it better that he and hopefully millions of other kids that are born around now don't have that burden and, can have a healthy attitude towards their mental health and can address their problems honestly, see them, not be ashamed of them. Because that's what we started this whole conversation with. So
I genuinely think it's getting better.
yes, so do I.